Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Got the thing. Zoom said words to me. Anyways, what is up, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Popcorn Pillow Talk presented by Grapevine Media. I am your host, Zach Nunez. I'm here with my co-hosts. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Connor, go for it.
What's up, everybody? I'm Connor. My favorite movie of all time is The Anchorman. It's the greatest piece of cinema ever created, and we're gonna talk movies. I think we should all tell our favorite movie. That might be a good way to start.
All right,
cool.
I'm Matt Donahue. You guys probably already, if you know Grapevine, you know me and Connor pretty well, so I don't need to tell you what I do. I'd say
You're so humble,
movie,
bro.
Yeah, my favorite movie of all time has got to be. I'm gonna go out on a limb here, dude. I'm gonna go Kicking and Screaming. Very underrated, very underrated film.
I know you got a lot of love for Kicking and Screaming.
One of Will Ferrell's top movies has to be.
I mean, maybe in the top 20. Yeah,
it's one of the Will Ferrell movies of all time for sure.
I think you both need to go back and rewatch it.
I will, man. Out of respect to you, I will.
It just reminds me of that movie Ladybugs with Rodney Dangerfield, which is basically just the same movie, but a better. Honestly. Anyway, as I already said, I'm Zach Nunez. If I had to pick a favorite movie, geez, I mean, the movie I've probably watched the most in my life is Anchorman as well. It's one of my favorite comedies. But I'll pick a different one, and I will go with Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is a personal favorite of mine. Edgar Wright is one of my favorite directors, and that's his best film in my opinion. So much so that I can't actually hear the song "Don't Stop Me Now" by Queen without thinking of the scene in the movie where they're in the bar and everything, when they're hitting the zombies and everything is synced up with their action. It's excellent. It's excellent.
Classic. That's a classic movie. I respect it.
I think in the future we should definitely do I don't know if I would actually say Anchorman is my legit favorite movie. It's the movie I've seen the most, and it's like gun to my head. It is, but there's films out there that I enjoy much more as a film. But I think overall,
I'm definitely following that. But I mean, I'm definitely a huge comedy guy for sure. Like I love big comedies, but I don't know if Kicking and Screaming is my. If I have like one movie to watch the rest of my life, like I don't know if I'm picking it. I don't know if I'm picking.
You don't know if it's
I think I'm picking something with a little more story behind it, film wise. But I think one of the most underrated comedies of all time.
All right. Well, speaking of film, speaking of some well-known properties, people love Anchorman, right? We're going to talk about something else that people love today. That's going to be Batman. But before we start, make sure to follow us on all of our social platforms. You get updates about new episodes, new pieces that we got coming out, some special content coming out on the social media side. But today we're going to be doing a conversation about the 2022 adaptation of The Caped Crusader, played by Robert Pattinson in a new film directed by Matt Reeves. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Matt Reeves's prior filmography. I'm going to bring it up right now while we're sitting here. But as we get into it, we're going to start with just some general impressions on the movie. So we're going to start here, spoiler-free thoughts. Of course, we will get much more into spoilers as we progress throughout the video here, throughout the episode here. But Matt, we'll start with you. What were your initial thoughts coming out of the theater seeing the Batman last week?
So being a big Marvel guy, I'm a huge Marvel guy. Definitely, I've enjoyed their films over the past whatever years it's been since Iron Man. I think I haven't enjoyed the DC stuff as much since, the Dark Knight trilogy. I'll just come out and say I haven't ever been like a huge fan of the stuff they put out. Not that they haven't put out good movies. I think that I don't know how many total movies they put out, but there's 3 or 4 that are very good. But I think that this was for sure the best step in that direction of DC trying to get on that level where Marvel is now, you know what I mean? And what they've done. This is definitely the best step that they could have taken going that way with if not their most their most popular hero in Batman. I can make the argument Superman or whatever it is. That's not what we're talking about though, but I'm saying in terms of, how they brought this character, in this new, we've seen him how many times? I don't know how many different Batmans we've seen at this point, but I think that it was I really liked it. I thought it was really, really good. I think the obvious complaint, 3 hours is they're definitely, it got slow at times. I felt like some parts weren't necessarily needed, but then again, I think that that's, you know, having seen it only one time, I don't know if that's going to hold up, in the next few years. I don't know where they're going to go with it. What pieces of this movie are going to show light in later films, if they do later films or whatever. So I think that whole argument of it's too long is, I think when you first see it, you're like, yeah, that was definitely too long. But you don't know what they're going to do. What parts of the movie are going to be valuable years later down the road. So overall, though, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. I left the theater and I was like, yeah, that's what Batman should be. You know what I mean? That's the kind of that's where I was at. The detective feel. I thought that came through in the movie a lot, which I really like. And maybe that's just because, like I said, I'm a huge fan of the Dark Knight trilogies, and it was more detective in that sense. So I don't know. I was a really big fan of it. I'm definitely going to see it again for sure. Even though it's 3 hours, I'm more than willing to dedicate, 12 hours of my life to that movie. That's how good it was. So, I could see it 4 times and be good with it every time.
All right. So just before we get Connor's thoughts here, I just want to interject. I went and looked up Matt Reeves' filmography. This is his fifth directorial feature, having previously done the final two movies in the Planet of the Apes trilogy from the 2010s, Dawn for the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes. And then as well, directing the English remake of the horror film Let Me In from 2010, which is all right. And then he also directed Cloverfield, which came out in 2008. So Matt Reeves has made quite the name for himself over the last 15 years or so. But Connor, what are your initial thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, and the last two, what is it, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War of the Planet of the Apes?
Yes.
I mean, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is by far the best movie in that trilogy.
So good.
And all three of those movies are crafted so well. But Matt Reeves' take on the last two are honestly, if you can just take Talking Monkeys and make me cry, that's I mean, seriously, that's impressive. The Batman is one of those movies that I think you go into it with such huge the mindset you go into it is this is going to be the best movie. Now reading prior reviews and kind of seeing what people had to say before the movie, you go into this is going to be the greatest movie of all time. This is going to be the Batman movie. This is going to be the creme de la creme. It's tough to live up to that no matter what you are. I left the movie and I was a bit perplexed. I wasn't sure what to think. The way I looked at it was this wasn't the best. This might not make sense, but it makes sense in my head. This wasn't the best movie featuring Batman, but this was the best Batman movie. In terms of, and what I mean by that is The Dark Knight is a better film altogether in terms of what you look for in a film. But if you're talking what you think of when you're talking about a Batman movie, it's the Batman. It's Robert Pattinson's or Matt Reeves' Batman. So it hit all the nails on the head. I mean, in terms of being kind of more of that detective noir film style, I really enjoyed how they portrayed the character of Batman, and we'll get into it more. The opening few minutes kind of set the tone as to what you're going to be expecting from the Batman and how the character is going to grow. But to kind of go off what Matt was saying, I think why I was a little bit hesitant to say that I really love this movie directly leaving the theater was because of things that happened where you can kind of tell they're trying to force themselves to be like Marvel. Not every single movie needs to lead into another movie directly. There's not, you don't need to force things to happen to build a universe. We saw that perfectly with Joaquin Phoenix. Who directed the Joker? Joaquin Phoenix's
Todd
Joker.
Phillips.
Todd Phillips. We saw that perfectly. That didn't lead to anything. There was no forced additions to that, and it was a great movie. It was an Oscar-winning movie, and I think that in terms of the quality of film it is right up there, if not better, with what it's trying to do. But I was hesitant to really, really fall in love with this movie directly after leaving the theater. But the more time I let it stew, the more I like it. So I'm excited to really dive into it.
Yeah, I personally can tell you that as a massive Batman fan myself, you actually kind of took the words out of my mouth in that, like you said, I don't think this is the best movie with Batman in it, but I do feel like this is the definitive cinematic portrayal of the Batman world. I understand that the portrayal of the character in this instance, for someone especially, people out there who might have just only seen the Nolan movies, or even then have seen the Nolan movies, and then they know about like Adam West's Batman and Michael Keaton's Batman. This is a portrayal of the character that is so unique compared to that, and so wildly different that I can see it kind of putting some people off. But personally, the thing I love the most about the movie is honestly, I think they just got the world and the feeling and the way the characters function so well in the movie. Like I mentioned it in the review that I wrote for the site, is like the Nolan movies, I would say, were a realistic take on Batman. Realistic is a word that I've seen thrown around about this movie that I wouldn't necessarily use to describe it. I don't think I would use the word realistic to describe this movie, but I wouldn't say it's a realistic portrayal, but I would say that it is a grounded portrayal of Batman. There's not a bunch of super fantastical things going on, but there's also a lot of comic booky kind of stuff that wouldn't have happened in the Nolan trilogy that they tackle in a more grounded way in this film. Generally speaking, I found myself really loving this. I do have some nitpicks with the movie, and it is kind of that. It's my issues are largely nitpicking, with the exception of one thing that you actually alluded to there, Connor, which we'll talk about later. But I think the thing that impressed me the most, honestly, is just the feel of the whole thing. Like I mentioned, the Nolan movies can kind of feel like it's Pittsburgh, or it feels like it's Chicago, or it feels like it's New York, because that's where the movies were shot and they were going for something super realistic. This movie, even though it was shot in those same places, feels like Gotham City.
It was Gotham. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. And going like, even from that first few minutes, I mean, there's a shot where it's kind of all encompassing what looks like the Gotham version of Times Square, and it's just coming down, and it's like, it's Gotham. It's alive. However you think of Gotham from the comic books or even from the animated series of Batman or animated movies, that it's perfect. It's perfect. One of my favorite parts about the movie.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much to even be said about the way that like the color red is used in the movie. I remember watching the trailers and thinking that the movie was a little too red for my taste. But now having seen it, it was almost like the complaint that a lot of people had with the complaint that I have, frankly, with the first Twilight movie, which is an awful comparison. And I actually do want to talk about that when we get into our spoiler thoughts of it. But like Twilight in general, having watched it recently for the first time, is way too blue, just in general. The whole movie is just blue. It's got this weird hue to it. It's strange. It's off-putting. The use of warmer colors in this movie to signify, things like hope or fear, I thought were really effective in this movie in a way that it wouldn't have been. Even a movie like The Matrix, right? It's green. The Matrix is just green. And every movie that ripped off The Matrix afterwards was also very green. Jet Li's The One, for example, or Battlefield Earth, for example, was just very green. So I love the use of like color and scope. I thought the cinematography was fantastic. I'm trying to look up the name of the guy who helmed it.
Yeah, I'm also trying to look that up right now, but that is, and I think that is what, in comparison to the move, like the former DC movies in the last like 5-6 years, like that's something that like um and probably it's just because I'm like I love the Nolan movies so much, and just like this, like the cinematography and just like the way that movie is constructed, it's like we're talking about. It has that Gotham feel to it, where it's like you said, it's not like realistic, but like it's portrayed that way, where it's like yes, this is like something that like could actually happen. Versus my biggest nitpicking thing, not even nitpicking thing, but more so just my biggest thing that I was put off by in the DC movies over the past, specifically like with Batman in them, is I just felt like it was never realistic in a sense. I mean, I thought that there was a big like balancing of like we want this to be realistic, but like we're CGIing like a lot of stuff into it, and that was my biggest turnoff with those movies, was that I always just felt like this isn't like realistic, and I guess this is probably why I like this new version of Batman so much, is just because they pulled it off where it's like yes, it's not real life, but it could be, and I think that that's something that the Nolan movies, all of them, did so well, was that like it was very believable that like this is, like it never in the movie was I like, okay, this is like CGI'd and this isn't like real, and this, like, I felt like it was all like real, what I mean? It felt real. So that was another big thing that I really liked, and that all comes back to the cinematography, and I think the way that the way that the movie was directed and the way that it was shot and all that is the biggest thing for me that I really loved. And again, it's because I was a huge fan of the Nolan movies, and just the way that those were shot. And maybe that's just because that was the Batman that I grew up in. Those were the first movies of like a real action Batman that I watched. So maybe that's just like set in my head that like that's what it should be like. And getting back to the whole Marvel thing is, and I think the universes are just so different, and I think Marvel, like, you expect it like to be like CGI, you know what I mean? Like an unrealistic almost, in a sense, where it's like I don't expect that with DC. So I think that was a big thing for me. That was like the cinematography in this movie really swung me, you know what I mean? Like, and that's something that I expect from Batman movies, and the detective feel, like those things. I think it was just very well balanced throughout the movie and believable.
There's the actual shooting of the film was fantastic. And I don't know the cinematographer's name, but it was the same person who did Rogue One. And there's certain scenes that you can tell it's the same concept as Rogue One, more specifically the Darth Vader scene. But yeah, one of the more well shot movies I've seen in a very, very long time.
Yeah.
If this isn't an early Oscar contender for best cinematography for next year, then I don't know what movie will be.
The guy behind the camera for this one is Greg Fraser. He not only did cinematography for Rogue One, he also was the cinematographer for Dune from last year. So this man knows how to make a good looking movie.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
He is.
He's no scrub, that's for sure.
Yeah,
it's not his first time. Okay.
No. He is experienced. All right. So why don't we get into some more specifics about the movie? And this is general spoiler warning moving forward. Not everything is going to be, not everything I say or we say is going to be spoiler heavy, but moving forward, expect us to talk about specific points in the movie, specific things that were not discussed in trailers, anything like that. Speaking of which, I don't know about you guys. I didn't see any of the I didn't purposely go out of my way to watch any of the trailers before this movie. I caught a couple of them, just at other movies that the trailer happened to have played. But I tried to stay away the most from trailers beforehand, which means I kind of forgot that the Penguin was even supposed to be in this movie. And that's kind of where I want to start is the performances in the film. Yeah. Because I think there's important things to say about all of them. One, on the note of the Penguin, Colin Farrell is indistinguishable in the movie as Oswald Cobblepot, and it's not just like the makeup and whatnot that they have on him. I don't know how that voice came out of Colin Farrell.
He transitioned into his inner Robert De Niro is what he did.
There was at one point where like he said Goyle when he was talking. He was like, "You'll get the Goyle," and I was like, "This is Colin Farrell speaking right now." Like I had no idea that this was supposed to be Colin Farrell. Completely blew over my head. I forgot he was in the movie, and when I saw it, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's Colin Farrell." And I was like, "Wait a second."
I can't believe you have the willpower to not watch trailers before.
Yeah, I'm a huge like
movie.
I'm like I think I'm the exact opposite from Zach, and I think Connor is too. Is that like when a trailer comes out, I watch it like maybe 15, 20 times, like and just like dissect.
So do I.
To dissect every single part of the trailer, and maybe that gets back to the whole like Marvel fandom and like just wanting to see every little thing because like there's in those trailers there's just like little tricks that they get you with. But I definitely watched this trailer like from the moment I saw the first trailer, whenever it was, like I think it was almost 2 years ago when the stuff started coming out from this movie. I was like, all right, I'm very into this movie already. And like whenever there's an update on, like I follow all the Twitter accounts for it of like every like little like poster that comes out of like something like that.
We always text about the new Rockstar breakdowns. It's like, hey, did you hear about this? You hear about that? This is what's gonna happen. Friggin'. It's more specific with Doctor Strange when that trailer came out, but it's like, again, I'm sorry for spoiling it for you, Matt, when that trailer came out. But that was.
By the way, in front of the Batman, they played that trailer for the new Doctor Strange movie. It was the first time I saw it. Remember, because I told you I didn't see it in front of the Super Bowl, and you spoiled it for me.
Yeah. So Connor
and then I saw it, and I was like, "Oh yeah."
I spoiled it for Zach.
Yeah. I was like,
"Bro, how was I supposed to know? You have a sports podcast. How was I supposed to know that you weren't watching the Super Bowl 5 minutes before it started?"
I was running late to the Super Bowl party and didn't get there till the.
You can't blame me for that though.
Yeah.
I'm like, my boy Matt is definitely watching this. I'm gonna tell him about Professor X, and then I felt like a huge dick.
Well, it was like when we went and saw Batman, and I assume it was you who texted him, and he was like, or when we went and saw Spider-Man last semester.
Yeah.
I assume it was you, Connor, who texted him afterwards. It's like, "Oh, did you see the Doctor Strange teaser?" And Matt was like,
"Nah."
"Oh."
Nah.
So the first thing I wanted to address, it's actually the first thing that I wrote in the piece that I wrote, is the whole Robert Pattinson of it all. I personally thought the casting was fine. I know there was a lot of like averse reaction to it on the internet, partially from a bunch of people who I assume watch maybe one movie a year, so they just conflate Robert Pattinson with Twilight,
yeah,
which is why it was an awful cinematography comparison that I brought up earlier. First of all, the whole why is a sparkly vampire guy playing Batman is absolutely absurd. Robert Pattinson has done more than enough over the last 15 years to earn your respect as an actor. I mean, Jesus Christ, have people seen The Lighthouse? Come on.
It's one of the I honestly don't know the word to describe that movie. I don't think there's a word in the English language that correctly describes that movie. Remember when like he turns into an octopus in The Lighthouse or something like that, or it's like tentacles? Yes. It's like I still don't know what that is. I still don't know what I don't even know what that movie, like what happened in that movie. I just know that like Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson just acted the fuck out of the script. And
they were like kind of gay.
I mean, do you blame them?
I don't blame
especially Willem Dafoe. Do you blame him? And I personally think Willem Dafoe is a great looking older gentleman. So I don't blame Robert Pattinson either, but that's neither here nor there.
But yeah, so it was but The Lighthouse is example enough, right? So I thought he was a good casting, and I thought that Robert Pattinson, the way he played this version of the character was excellent. For this version of the character, I think what was so cool about it is that they focused on a lot of the minutia surrounding Batman. For example, the fact that they show him with like the black eye makeup on after he takes the cowl off. Yeah. It's something that you go back and watch Batman 1989, for example. There's a scene where he pulls the cowl off in front of Michelle Pfeiffer, and the shot before he pulls it off, he has the eye makeup on. but then it's just a cut away, so they can cut back to him without the eye makeup on. So when he pulls off the cowl, there's no eye makeup on underneath it. This is I think for a lot of people is going to be a very new portrayal of Batman, one that doesn't speak very often. I joked with a couple of people afterwards that I think he might actually say more in the opening and closing narration than he does in the rest of the movie combined, which isn't necessarily
Definitely.
a bad thing.
Yeah,
Subtle. That definitely subtle in his tone. Yeah.
I think too it was like, and that was one of the the complaints that I saw like online, was that like he didn't like talk. But again, like you just pointed to, this is like a new portrayal of him, and I think you could make the argument that it's kind of like the darkest portrayal we've seen of him. You know what I mean? Like there's like, and not that there was like any like they don't show like. They don't go into like so much of like his past where like they show like the crazy moments in it where like everyone's dying and whatnot, you know what I mean, of what we've seen in every other Batman movie. But it's the way he carries himself and the way like throughout the movie, it's not a Batman that we've ever seen. And I think that also speaks to the point of like his lack of lines, because that's just who this character is. And I think that's also the best part of it, is because that adds to him being Batman. You know what I mean? I think some of my best scenes with him were like when he's at one of the crime scenes, like very early on in the movie. He's just not talking, but he's just walking around looking at everything. You know, those were the things that I love. That in every other Batman movie, you know, when he's there, he's talking. You know, it's him and Gordon are talking about whatever. But in these ones, it was like Gordon in another cop dissecting the scene, and Batman Pattinson just walking around dissecting everything else but the body or something like that. You know what I mean? Just dissecting everything. I think that also adds to it. And again, that's a reason why I really liked this version of the Batman that we've seen.
That's something I'm glad you brought that up, Matt, because my favorite part about Pattinson portraying Batman, and we're talking Batman, we're not talking Bruce Wayne just yet, is how methodical he was as a character, how almost just like what is it, serpentine? It's just like very, very slow, very, very deliberate in every single movement that was made while he was in the bat suit. Also one of the best bat suit, I think the best live action bat suit we've seen. And I don't think it's particularly close. But there was a scene right in the opening of the film while he's narrating where criminals are looking into the shadows and thinking, is the Batman in there? He's almost portraying himself as, I am the shadows. I think he even says that at some point. He says, I am the shadows. I am fear. I am vengeance. And kind of corny, you know, like when you think of Batmans in the past, like you don't think of Michael Keaton's Batman saying that, or one of these other portrayals, maybe Christian Bale, maybe Ben Affleck. But as the movie goes on, with that first detective scene when they're investigating the murder of the mayor, just the way Batman presents himself is, I don't know if that was a deliberate choice by Pattinson. I don't know if that was how it was written into the script by Matt Reeves of how this is how he wants his Batman to be portrayed, but I couldn't get over how menacing Batman was throughout the entirety of the film. There's him walking out of the shadows a few times, you know, in the beginning when he confronts the gang of whoever they were, several different times in the movie, when he walks out to deal with the bomb across the I forgot who the guy was, the DA or someone like that. When he's walking towards Cobblepot, when he's walking towards the Penguin after he hits his car. Just a methodic, menacing Batman portrayal that, I mean, I couldn't get enough of it. I have my gripes with the film, but that was 100% far, far, far away my favorite aspect of the Batman.
Yeah, and it comes with I think what is the larger thematic point of the movie is the fact that Batman in this instance as someone who hasn't been doing it for very long, that's clear by the fact that not only they directly reference it, but he's consistently at odds with the police. Like they're still at the point where the cops don't want him around, and they still see him as like this brutal vigilante. But the fact that the whole point of the movie, and that's kind of where we get to the narration that bookends the film, is that he's trying to figure out as a character. He kind of learns over the course of the movie that what he's doing, his approach to being Batman, is relatively naive, and what he should be doing as the Batman is trying to provide hope rather than trying to intimidate everyone. We see at the beginning of the movie, like you mentioned, he in the narration he mentions that the bat signal is meant to help him when he's not able to be somewhere, because criminals will see it and could be convinced that he's around.
Yeah.
And they show some criminals running off and whatnot. At the end of the movie, you have, after the whole flooding situation, you have him lifting this woman onto an airlift, and she grabs at his hand and she doesn't want to let it go. So he just goes up with her. Lets his arm go up with her before she leaves. The whole thing about the character throughout the majority of the movie is that he's convinced that the way to stop crime is through intimidation.
Sure.
Right. This is why it's one of my favorite moments in the movie too, at the very beginning, where he just, the first time you see him in the suit and he walks out of the shadows with that gang, it's just the sound of his footsteps in the theater
with the rain coming down. Yeah. Right. The water
is just so hulking and huge and loud and slow. Like I said, it's a unique portrayal for the character to be in that kind of a state. It's a version of the character that's very much so still processing his past and also still working through what it means to be the hero that he wants to be. What
he wants the Batman to represent. He doesn't know that yet. His thing is, he wants the Batman to represent vengeance. He wants it to strike fear into his city, who he feels, for whatever reason, he has the responsibility of upholding justice, which is a main point throughout all Batman films. But where this film differs is, and a lot of it with that last shot of him carrying that same woman before he puts her on the helipad carrier, or on the stretcher that's taken by the helicopter, of him kind of walking with that woman with the sun in the background. You see the Batman in the daytime, and I know you have in the past, but it's still kind of strange to see Batman during the day. It represents full circle, 360 degrees of going from wanting to instill fear to wanting to instill hope. And that's a huge driving factor. And I think where we're going to see the progression of this character from this movie. I know that we have opinions on how they're building that universe, but I agree with kind of how hulking and menacing the character is, although he has a complete character change by the end of the film. I want to talk more about Alfred, if you guys want. I want to talk about the Penguin, obviously, and all the other characters quickly, but I want to know your guys' opinions on Alfred and how he was portrayed in the film.
So I really liked Andy Serkis as Alfred. I thought it was a good portrayal of the character. It was one of my issues with the film that I wish there were more of that dynamic between Bruce Wayne and Alfred in the movie. It was one of those, like, this is a universe in which Alfred was the one to teach Batman how to fight, right?
And you're not gonna, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you can't tell me, oh, I taught you how to fight and not show it. I was so pissed off. Continue. Yeah.
Well, it's like, right, because like in the Nolan movies, Batman goes away, gets trained by ninjas, he's come back, and Alfred is an old guy who's his butler. This time, they're a lot closer in age, and Alfred was the one that raised him the entire time and taught him how to fight. And I just wish there was a little bit more with that relationship, They were there to, Alfred helped him out to decipher a couple of the clues sometimes, which I thought was really cool. Because I think this movie did a good job of giving Alfred a little more agency rather than just being the butler that helps out with some of his tech.
Yeah.
But I just wish there was more. It was the point where later in the movie when Alfred opens that bomb that's meant for Bruce and he blows up, I thought he was dead. I was like, oh, this is an interesting thing where like, and to be fair, I wouldn't have necessarily been.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. I wouldn't have cared. Whatever.
And I think going along with what he's saying is that's, like I don't know if I think when I think of Alfred, before this movie, it's the same character every single time. He's the butler. He's a very old butler. That's like what it is. White hair. It's like I think if we're getting like to, like, I think the portrayal of this Alfred has a lot more potential, but like we've been like the common theme is that it just didn't come through enough where like I really cared for Alfred as much as I think the way, like, the death scene. It's like, it was like he could die, and it's like this doesn't add or take away from the movie that much, because I just don't think he was as relevant as he's been portrayed in other movies. I think when I think to the Nolan movies, I think if in the Dark Knight he dies, at some point, like, I think that hits home way more for the audience versus in this movie. I just didn't think he was like prevalent enough for me to like care enough about what was really happening. I think that he was only there for, like Zach said, just to help solve, some of the things, and that was like really it. And then the hospital scene, which I think was the shifting in the movie. I think if they spent a little more time with Alfred, and like Connor said, maybe they show Alfred teaching him like how to fight, and like it makes you care more about Alfred. I think that hospital scene hits harder, and is more like, all right, this is the shift and everything. It's just more apparent. So I just wish he was a little more apparent, and like made me care, I guess, more for the character a little bit more.
Yeah. They could have done Alfred way better. It's one of the aspects of this movie I did not enjoy, because Andy Serkis is so talented. Speaking about Planet of the Apes, he's so talented, and great casting for Alfred as well. Really great casting, interesting, and the fact that he's the one who shows Batman how to fight, the greatest martial artist on the planet, master of every single martial art, the world's greatest detective, peak human condition, can best almost anybody, superhero or not, in straight hand-to-hand fisticuffs. And you don't show any of that as a kid, as anything. And I enjoyed how this movie didn't really get into the death of the Waynes. Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of expects that now. I wouldn't have been mad at it to see it, but I enjoyed how we didn't have to go through that again. But you got to give me something here. Like, maybe it's going to come in a different movie, but it should have been in this one, because you laid the line. I was thinking
is like, maybe because you kind of jump right in. Like, when you look back at the Nolan films, the first one is about him becoming Batman. And they dedicate like almost close to like half the movie about him going and all his past with Ra's al Ghul and all that. But I think it was interesting, and not that I didn't like, I actually enjoyed it more because, like Connor just said, it's very like we expect that. We expect a prelude to how he got to where he is, and here it's just assumed. And I like that they did that, but I do wish there was like a little more like, okay, how is he who he is? Why is he like? I wish there was a little bit more to that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that was where they kind of, if they were to miss anywhere on this movie, that has to be my biggest gripe with the film, is that there wasn't like enough, like, we just like, it's just like a random day and he's just walking around, and like that's just how it starts, and it would just like go with it from there. There was no like, why is he Batman? How is he Batman? Like how he got there. But it could be something they explore later on, like in a different movie. I don't know, and maybe that's the plan, but that was my biggest gripe with the whole film, was that like I wish there was a little more into it of like how is he who he is. It's just like I think it did kind of I think it did kind of describe that a bit without directly alluding to it. I mean, everything with
kind of figuring out how his parents were murdered, to the corruption of what he perceived was his father for a while. I think it kind of like led a little bit to why he became Batman, but I agree. It's like, that's something the Dark Knight trilogy did pretty well. I think it's something that, even, Batman versus Superman touched on a bit. And I want to make this known. I'm the only Snyder fan here. I don't think you guys are fans of Batman versus Superman or Zack Snyder's Justice League. So that might skew opinions here, because I think Zack Snyder's Justice League is chef's kiss. But
I do think the Snyder cut of the Justice League is very good.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was better than the original. I can say that.
But yeah, so I think they went about it in a more indirect way with this film, rather than hitting the putting it in front of us.
That, and that's another thing, is like I didn't like I like that they did that. I just wish there was like a little bit, like not so much like you just have to like assume it, like assume like this is that, I wish.
Yeah.
But again, I think that and because you're like we're all superhero fans, that like to us that can be okay, you know what I mean? Because like we know the story of Batman, but I think to the general public, and people who, like Zach said, people who watch movies once a year that will come in and say that this movie wasn't that good. Like, why is he like, I think like that's where like it rubs people the wrong way. But you can't please everybody, obviously. And I'm happy that they did it the way they did it, because it was different. And I think, again, it was my only gripe with the film, because I loved the film. And it was like, I think that's like a nitpicking thing, because overall the film, it didn't like kill the film. You know what I mean? That it was just, it's just how they did it. So I thought it was good.
I say it didn't bother me at all, really, partially because, like, I don't know, like majority of people that see this movie, like, how Batman became Batman, right? It's Batman, one of the most famous characters in all of pop culture, right? His parents died. Cool. Now he's Batman, right? What the interesting thing though, you bring up with the Waynes and the way that he figures out new details about him, is that's also a different take on the lore behind the Wayne family, because normally the movie is about the Riddler and exposing corruption. That's been a thing with the Riddler for a while. But where I think this movie really excels in terms of the Riddler Batman conflict is in its moral ambiguity, generally speaking. So you have he finds out that his parents, normally when you see the Waynes, you see them as like, oh, they were these perfect people who were gunned down in an act of senseless violence outside of a theater. And then we have Batman. This time, they're people that fucked up. You know, they made real mistakes, and they faced the deadliest of consequences for those mistakes, caused by people that were known to them, and caused by, to some extent, a level of political corruption from his father. It adds a different layer to it. And I actually want to point out one scene in particular that drove that home for me. And that was the scene where Batman goes to see the Riddler at prison right after they capture him in the movie, and they have that conversation. And there's this moment, I can't quite remember. Oh, it's when the Riddler tells him, he's like, you've been helping me out with this whole thing the whole time. And there is a real, like, couple seconds, like, Batman pauses and just looks at him. And you can tell it's a moment where in the character's head, the gears are turning of like, oh,
yeah, I
have been helping him. Mm-hmm. Or have I been helping this guy be a serial killer, right? Have I been helping this terrorist, as that becomes at the end of the movie. And it's the moments like that I think make villains really, really special. Like, that's what separates the great villains, the good villains, from the great. So that the great villains not only provide, like a big body to fight the hero, which is something that the Riddler as a character doesn't provide. What he does provide, though, is not only just like a fun foil, he leads him on a chase through a bunch of clues, is that he, as a villain, makes our hero question whether or not they're doing the right thing, and whether or not they're saving the city or they're abetting in a serial killer. You know,
Couldn't
that's
have
it.
said it any better.
It's an actual like internal dialogue that you see the character of Batman work through in that scene.
And I would argue that's the point where he
Yeah.
realizes that he can't be, his main goal can't be vengeance. That's I would argue that exact scene. I remember feeling the same exact way, and they were trying to hammer that home when he's beating up the Riddler goon, and he says, "Why are you doing this?" or something along those lines. He says, "I am vengeance." I didn't really, that just in terms of how they got there, it didn't hit home for me like it should have. That might just be me personally, but looking back on it, it does kind of correlate with everything leading up to when he is to when he visits the Riddler in Arkham. I'm assuming he's in Arkham.
Yeah. We learned he's in Arkham from something we see with a different scene in the prison later. We'll put a pin in that for the moment. I just want to talk about the rest of the general rest of the performances here, which I think can kind of lead us into a couple of different conversations. First of all, Paul Dano as the Riddler is legitimately terrifying in this movie. I kid you not. The opening scene, the very opening of the film, where he's got the binoculars and he's watching the mayoral candidate whose name I cannot remember before he goes into his house and kills him. You obviously, when the movie opens, I think it's fair to assume that's like, oh, okay, we're getting how the Waynes died, right? Like there's a possibility. But when he goes inside and that one shot of him on the phone, the character's name that I can't remember, I gotta look it up now because it's gonna upset me.
The guy being elected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I'm trying to look it up. I can't remember it, but the mayor,
no,
he was
not the mayor. The other one that's
it's Mayor Don Mitchell.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyways, when he's on the phone, talking to somebody about what's airing on TV, and then he steps to the side, and the Riddler is just right behind him in the shadows. That sent real shivers down my body.
It's terrifying. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was a perfect way to introduce the Riddler and the vibe we were supposed to get.
I love the fact that they turned that version of the character into basically a horror villain. Because you have the fun portrayals of the Riddler. Obviously, Jim Carrey back in the day is very fun, very aloof, right? That's not going to play in a movie like this. Not going to play at all. And to have him, and I will say one thing that I noted after I saw the movie was that like this movie was like one or two angle changes in a couple of crime scenes away from being rated R. Like,
and I'm glad you brought that up because I was talking to a few friends of mine after seeing the movie the next day, and another huge gripe of mine is I understand why you market a 3-hour movie as PG-13, because if you market a 3-hour movie as rated R, it's going to really affect the box office. But I mean, to me, the Riddler was fantastic. I mean, I'm talking in terms of acting, Heath Ledger levels of a performance. However, I mean, and just talking about one scene in particular where I really think it would have elevated Paul Dano's Riddler up to like this guy is on par with Heath Ledger, and it's not even like you can't even debate it. Is you saw how it was implied how brutal the Riddler was. I feel like we needed to see how brutal the Riddler was, and a great example is when there's in the morgue with the police commissioner. I believe his name is Pete, or I think it was Savage. I think that was his. Savage. And I feel like if we just, because you saw both of them, you saw both Officer Gordon and Batman standing right above the body, and you see them look down. And I thought they were going to give us a quick angle at what Savage's face looked like after getting eaten by rats.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And I get it. It's PG-13. You can't really do that. But I feel like if I saw kind of what the mayor looked like with his face unwrapped, and you kind of saw more of what the Riddler was doing, it would add so much to the character. And I walked away thinking that because it's just implied. And I think this is not the type of movie that you want to imply that, because this is your chance to show it.
And get into that, like, and I think that that's something when you look back at Ledger's performances, like they don't show they don't show those things, but they show how he does. Like I think to that scene where like the mob's meeting in like the kitchen or whatever, and he walks up and he has the pencil and he sticks it up and he just takes the guy's head and just like quickly, like it's something quick like that, but it's like this is like Connor's touching upon is like this guy's insane. You know what I mean? Like, and like he doesn't care. You know what I mean? I think, but I do agree that like I love the fact that one, they chose the Riddler. I think, you know, I'm a huge fan of like this actor and everything about the Riddler. I thought it was great. I thought the way he was crazy. You know what I mean? And he made you feel like he was insane. You know, I think that Batman villains, that's what it has to be. You know what I mean? They have to give off that effect where it's like, this isn't like another villain in a superhero movie. It's like, no, this dude is clinically insane and like it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And he goes to the extreme lengths to do that. And I thought that the Riddler made this movie for me. You know what I mean? Like this is like, I think when I think of like, I don't think, and maybe this is just because how it was portrayed in the movie, but I don't think the Penguin and Colin Farrell's like could have been the main villain of this movie, because I just don't think it's it's that insanity level that people love. And I think that that's what makes Heath Ledger's performance so good, is like he's just insane. You know what I mean? Like, and it doesn't matter. I mean, in the way he goes throughout the movie, it just progressively gets more and more insane in how he thinks. And then you get the meeting between the two. In the moment that I really like fell in love with the Riddler, like the portrayal of him, is when the Riddler starts losing it in the cell and he just starts freaking out because something goes like a little off the plan. Like Batman wasn't all the way caught up, and like he just loses it for like that quick moment.
Yeah.
That for me, that scene, like when that happened, I like really, again, it was like another thing. Like I really love this character because like because that's what the Riddler is. The Riddler is very smart, but he's also clinically insane. And like, so I don't know that I agree that like this was, I'm not going to say Heath Ledger because Heath Ledger's performance is, you know, is the cream of the crop. But I think this was like a very close second. You know what I mean? Like just the way he went about it and the way he portrayed him. I thought it was perfect.
Yeah, the two murders that we see directly. The first one being at the very beginning. I love that scene because after he hits him with what we eventually find out is the Tucker, I think is what it's called, whatever it is, the carpet tool. The thing I love about it, and it goes to speak about this movie's like attention to detail, is like after he knocks him out and he like sits down on his body, like the way he just like lumbers and kind of just falls over onto him, and like the breathing that you hear from inside the mask, like that is something that is super unnerving for me. It's like you just hear this heavy ass breathing under this like cumbersome mask that probably shouldn't be worn for an extended period of time because he's probably sweating buckets inside of that thing. And then he just like starts ripping the duct tape. And just the implication for me that like he murdered this man, wrapped his head in duct tape, and then cut off his thumb is just honestly terrifying to me. And then the other one was the scene with the DA at the funeral. I don't know about you guys, but it was like the one moment that like the tension was so high, like I could physically feel my heart beating faster while he was going through like the riddles with him. I just thought they nailed this character.
And him standing above, you know, then they released this clip before the movie, but him standing above on the corridor when everyone else is leaving because of they hear something coming through or whatever, but before the car comes through, and or Bruce Wayne looks up at the reason he goes to this is to pay respects, but also because, you know, serial killers like to see their work. They like to see the result of their work, which I think is like a documented fact. I think if you watch like a serial killer documentary, that's something that they actually like enjoy doing. And when he looks up at the corridor to kind of see where everyone's going, there's one person standing there, and you can just see in Robert Pattinson's face.
I didn't
it's
even catch that.
Yeah,
didn't
he's
catch
just
that.
standing.
This is new information to
right
me.
there. Yeah, if you go back and we'll tell
This is Robert
if we had
Pattinson,
an
not like-
editor, we tell him to put this clip in here right now, but we don't. But like Robert Pattinson looks up in the corridor and there's one guy who just stands there, just a
He's
shadow.
not running away after the car is already like comes through and the car's just sitting there. There's just one guy that's not running away and he's just looking at what's going on.
It's one of those moments that like that's a reason I love like really good horror as well.
Yeah.
Not that this movie is a horror movie, but it's just that makes me think about it. It's like it's always something. The scariest things to me are the things that are kind of just hidden in plain sight. Now you watch, it's like the scene we talked about when with the mayor when he walks away and Paul Dano is just standing there behind him. Or we've talked about before, Connor, our love of Hereditary, and there are moments in that movie in which they just cut to a wide and there's just something in the corner.
Dude, you can't do it. You're giving me goosies right now. You can't. I'm lit by myself. It's dark out, bro. Don't talk about that now, okay?
Yeah. So like a moment where like obviously your eye is trained to watch the car that's barreling through the crowd of people, but off in the distance, if you see it, is just the person orchestrating it standing there. That's genius filmmaking.
Yeah, it was very good. And another scene that really hammered home how good the Riddler was, because he was good and he was one of the best parts about this movie, along with Colin Farrell. Two great villains, you know, and Carmine Falcone was amazing.
Yeah, I didn't even know John Turturro was in the movie. That's the one legitimately I had no idea, and I was watching the whole movie and I couldn't pin down who the actor was, and then the credits started rolling and it was John Turturro, and I was like,
"Oh brother, where art thou?"
Yeah.
But when they slammed the Riddler's head down at the coffee bar or the diner, the corner diner, and he sees the Batman, and he starts smiling, that menacing kind of sadistic smile, psycho smile. He's very similar in a way to the character that he played in the movie Prisoners, which is kind of what I thought he was going to be. Paul Dano plays a great psycho.
Yeah.
Kind of
Prisoner is excellent.
He does look like one.
Yeah.
Paul Dano, no offense, but you're great. You know what I mean? You were born for these roles.
Yeah, Paul Dano, if you're watching this, you look like a psychopath, just so you know. You know, it was funny. That's one of my favorite moments too, is like, because that's a moment where even you can tell the character knows that his plan is working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like that smile, that's a moment of victory for the Riddler, is being caught and seeing Batman right there. Because
you know what that reminds me of? Like this is just another like similarity to the Heath Ledger performance, is like when Heath Ledger's in they're in the room talking and Batman's just beating the shit out of him, but he's like laughing. You know what I mean? Like it's like things like it's
Same
like little
vibes.
subtle cues like that where it's like he's losing in that moment, but he's winning because he knows in the long run this is exactly what I want to happen. It's
Great
little
point.
things like that like really made this character so good. One thing I want to switch, unless you got something else to say, Zach.
No, you go.
I want to talk about this because we haven't touched about it. He's a big part of this movie is Gordon. What did you guys think of that casting? And did you like it? Did you not like it? What were your thoughts?
Great casting, and I thought it was the most buddy that Gordon that we got with Batman, which I love because that's very comic accurate. They rely on each other a lot, and you got that with I forgot the Dark Knight's Gordon. I completely forgot
Gary Oldman.
his name. Gary Oldman, thank you. Plays Churchill in The Darkest Hour, one of my favorite movies. And you kind of get that with J.K. Simmons, and actually, no, you don't get that. I'm sorry, you don't get that at all. But to me, this was very. They're really relying on each other because he is one of the only good cops. He's one of the only people that Batman fully trusts. And they had some really, like, most of the humor I think came between the two of them.
Yeah.
Like when they're interrogating Penguin, which was a great scene.
That was a fantastic scene.
Yeah.
And then they just leave him there.
Like, what do you guys know? Basic Spanish?
We got to talk about Penguin too. At least give him a shout out because wow, I cannot wait to watch his HBO Max show that's coming out. It's going to be.
Is that a thing? That's a thing.
Yeah, that's a thing.
That's a thing. That's a thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn. All right. Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
very ready for that. So what's funny? That is one of the things that I wanted to talk about with the movies, that like it leans into genre really well. So when Matt Reeves when the movie was in production, it's been in production for a long time. They had a lot of snafus regarding the pandemic, and then so they couldn't film in certain locations. Then Pattinson got COVID. It was a whole long, arduous production. There was a lot of times during the production where Matt Reeves was directing from offset, and the actors just had earpieces in, and he was directing them just in their ear, not behind the camera or anything like that. So how the hell they pulled this off? Zero idea.
That's crazy. I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I've made
Did you guys know that the car chase scene, which is infamous now because you see it a lot in the trailers, when he's coming through the fire after the oil tanker flips over and he goes kind of like very comic booky, where the ramp just happens to come down and he can go over there was no according to Matt Reeves, there was no CGI in that process. That was an actual car coming out of an actual fire.
And again, that's like what I loved about this movie is it's just it seemed like it was real. You know what I mean? And I think that's
and a lot of it wasn't. They weren't shooting on scene. A lot of it was they weren't using green screens, but they were using, and I forgot what they actually call them in the business, but it's like there was, I don't know, I don't want to butcher how I'm describing it, but it wasn't a green screen. It was like a picture of the city, maybe like a live picture of how they created Gotham. And that's what they were standing in front of a lot for like how, when the scenes that they're in front of the bat signal, kind of up at the top of an abandoned building. And there's that scene where Batman is looking over the city. The sun's coming up. He's not actually on top of a building there.
Yeah.
He's in front of a screen, not a green screen like that's behind you right now, Matt. Yeah, he's in front of like an actual moving live rendition, but it's not real. They're in a studio. Yeah. I don't know if you guys knew that, but I didn't know that. That is impressive.
Making me like this movie even more now.
So, funny enough, that car chase is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And it's something that Matt Reeves does really well, is the camera angle on a part of a vehicle in which you see multiple characters in frame. The shot of the Penguin driving away after the tanker flips over, and the camera is very clearly strapped to his side view mirror. So you see him in the car and he's going, I got you. And then the fear that comes over his face as he sees the Batmobile fly in. It's just and there's a moment like this actually in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, when they're having their big battle at the end of the movie. And there's a shot where he straps the camera to a tank as the top of the tank, the cannon part of it is spinning, and you see the massive scope of the battle that they're having.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
it's something that Matt Reeves does really well, and I'm really glad that he brought that kind of shot back into this movie. But what I was talking about with Jeffrey Wright as Gordon, I like the character, I like the portrayal, I liked all of that. What I thought this movie did really well was, and you mentioned it with the ramp, right? It's like, one of those comic booky things where like the ramp kind of just happens. One of the things that this movie does really well is play into genre. So they talked about Matt Reeves talked about how he wanted to create a neo-noir, basically, which created for some really cool opportunities to finally get Batman to be a detective, which is not something we see very often in Batman portrayals, which is strange considering it's such a large part of the character. But like, I thought the use of the tech that he used in this movie, the contacts that he had, the way that the Batarang was just strapped to his chest, just like right there in the symbol, or even the wingsuit that he uses. Normally, Batman in a more comic booky portrayal, for example, would just like hold the cape and go, right? But he has this bat suit that has like a flying squirrel wingsuit on it. I thought that tech is really, really cool. It does, however, get into one of my few issues with the movie, and it's a pet peeve in dialogue that I have, that a lot of people might not have, but it annoys me every single time I see it in a movie. I thought the movie did humor really well. And I thought there was like, I didn't necessarily think there were a lot of moments that were particularly funny, except for, when they get the Penguin. I thought that whole exchange was very funny. The other one that I legitimately laughed out loud at in the in the theater was when they're figuring out the very first thing and they go to the mayor's car and he puts it he gets the thumb drive, right, and he just holds it up and he goes thumb drive.
Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
Gets the thumb out of the thing, he goes thumb drive, and it's one of those things where like the riddles in the movie, especially the one with the Spanish, the one that just ends up being URL, like it's one of those perfect things about the Riddler's plan that it's actually very simple, but he knows that Batman and Commissioner Gordon are going to work it into the ground so much that they're going to overthink it and not realize that it's just URL, you know?
Yeah. And let's going back onto the car chase real quick. I want to mention this, talking about how slow Batman moves. It was so funny when he goes to the car, and it must have been 3 minutes of the Batman just coming down. And I'm going to bring my mic with me and just putting his head down and looking into the car. It was literally 5.5 minutes. I timed it of the Batman just slowly leveraging his body down, just bending down enough to look at Cobblepot in the driver's seat. I'm pretty sure it was 8 minutes long of the Batman. That's how slow the Batman moves in this movie. It was 8 minutes, maybe 9.5 minutes, probably 10 if we're rounding up, dude, of the Batman just slowly going down and looking at him. That, I mean, I feel like that was just like, that was supposed to be funny. I feel like that was one of those things where it's like they're doing it over the top a little bit for art. Because I laughed out loud when I saw that. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that it does really well, is that like playing into this genre and to some of the more comic booky elements that this is why I use the term grounded rather than realistic, right? A realistic take on Batman wouldn't have that ramp that randomly just springs down so he can jump through the fire and catch the Penguin, right? It wouldn't have a moment where he goes thumb drive as he holds up a USB drive hooked up to a thumb.
Who's the mustache with the broken nose?
Yeah, exactly. Like it wouldn't have those like little moments in it. But I thought this did it really well. But also you mentioned the car chase. So I want to bring it back to that. The Batmobile in this movie is fucking sweet.
When he starts revving it at first,
oh
I was
my
like,
God.
oh, here we go.
That was another moment with the audio design where like when it starts up and you hear the engine rev for the first time and the flames come out the back of it, I had like the biggest like 4-year-old smile on my face because it was just so loud and cool. Like the Batmobile in this movie is awesome. And I hope moving forward that if we get more of these movies that we get to see some of like the Batmobile tech. You know, you see him do stuff with the Batmobile. Because in this one, it was very much
I really liked about the Batmobile here was that like, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but like they foreshadowed it at one point in the cave where like like the engine, like in the gears and all that, like he actually builds it. You know what I mean? That's like not something that like I don't know in the earlier movies if he builds it or not. I can't remember, but I know in the Nolan ones, it's just something that like he has like sitting around. You know what I mean? He just makes it into it, which is like. But I did like that this is like it's almost like a homemade Batmobile, which I thought I that added to me like liking the Batmobile here. Where it's just like it's not something just like a tank just like sitting around. It's like, yeah, I'll just use that. It was like
army tech, unused army tech, and I think that's an important part about how you should go into this movie and how you should perceive this movie. Because, and I think part of the reason why I initially left the theater thinking, is because I'm thinking about how is this Batman gonna stand? How is he gonna fight Superman? It's not believable when watching this movie that the Batman can hold his own against any other superhero, you know, within the Justice League. And I think I went into there kind of in the back of my mind thinking that, which you shouldn't. And my dad actually brought up a good point. This is like, if you go into this movie as more like a Punisher movie, like a real person grounded with no superpowers, but a tenacity, a maliciousness, a drive, but it's Batman, so it's cooler. There's a lot more to it.
There's less domestic terrorism. Yeah,
exactly. There's no John Bernthal, but this movie is very much a practical. This is just a rich guy that isn't the playboy billionaire that Bruce Wayne is portrayed to be yet, and he wants to make a difference.
Yeah, I love that portrayal of Bruce Wayne as well. Like, dude's honestly just a loser. Like, he's just a recluse. they mention it when he goes out to the funeral. They're like, "Oh, Bruce, haven't seen you in a while," because he's literally just like a nocturnal creature.
Yeah.
And one more thing before I think we can get into like the big issue that I assume I know Connor and I at least have, because we already alluded to it. I do want to mention that we've gone probably over an hour at this point and haven't mentioned Zoe Kravitz as.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say that.
Single time.
Yeah, we have to go into the Zoe Kravitz.
She is the definitive Catwoman, in my opinion.
She is. Yeah, Anne Hathaway was great, but yeah, I think Zoe Kravitz really took the character to another level, and she is smoking hot.
Yes. Well, that's part of the character, is that Catwoman is very sexy.
And Robert and not to just sexualize Catwoman, because let me tell you what, Robert Pattinson is super handsome, so it both works.
Yeah.
Robert Pattinson's jaw. I mean, like,
I would cut a
his
diamond,
jawline
bro.
is going crazy in this movie.
But one thing I did love about and I think that this adds to the movie too, is like when I think back to Anne Hathaway's portrayal of it, it's like, not that it is, but like you go through Zoe Kravitz, Catwoman's like separate mini movie inside this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like you go it's like almost two character arches and journeys in this one movie. You know what I mean? And like obviously it's a Batman movie, so Robert Pattinson is way bigger. Like the Batman one is the main one, but I think that that's what I really liked about this version of the Catwoman, is like I didn't feel like I cared. And this is getting back to the whole Alfred thing. Like when I look back at like the Nolan films, Catwoman in that film seemed like it was just like, okay, this is like a sidekick type thing. Like in this movie, it felt like, no, she's like a main character of this thing. Yeah. Like she's like, you care for what happens to this version of her.
And there is a lot of time devoted to why she does what she does as Catwoman. There's a lot of time devoted to her relationship with Carmine Falcone, which is also in turn a relationship with Batman, further entwining the two of them together. Yeah. And I want to say that I do think what I think Catwoman really adds as a character in this movie is like another dimension as the foil to Bruce Wayne. So the very first time, the very sort of first sequence when he follows her home and he's just watching into her apartment through the binoculars. There's one moment that when she gets into her like leather Catwoman suit, it cuts back to Robert Pattinson for like 2 seconds, and you can see this like flare in his eyes almost. This like weird, probably sexual, like romantic.
I'm a dude flare. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm a dude.
And then later in the movie, I think it adds something to Batman's character in particular, that it's not a said romance. Obviously, they share a kiss at one point, but I thought the scene where she skips town and Batman decides to follow her and they go on like this motorcycle ride together. I thought it was Jesus Christ, I knocked over my water bottle. I thought it was a really great moment. And it added a lot.
The look of horror in your eyes right now. I was looking down for a second. I didn't know what happened and I got scared. I thought you dropped a urn with ashes in it or something. Like
no, I hit it and then reacted too quickly. It probably wasn't going to fall over the first time I hit it. And in reacting too quickly, I hit it again and knocked it over. So anyways, I thought it added something to both characters and the possibility of her coming back, obviously moving forward, after she leaves town, but like they go on this ride and they quite literally go their separate ways as Batman heads back to Gotham.
In Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Vin Diesel's final ride with Paul Walker before he goes off into the sunset.
But I think Zoe Kravitz is going to come back. But that I got
for sure.
Let's talk about what is on our minds.
Okay, I have one thing that I wanted to mention earlier when I was talking about the dialogue. It's a gripe that I have with the movie, and it's a gripe I have with a lot of movies. There are too many moments in this movie where characters say what they see. It is a big pet peeve of mine when it comes to writing about film. One of the example that immediately comes to mind is when they go and inspect the body of the Commissioner Savage, and they have the rat race or the maze, right? There's a shot of the maze. It goes back to Gordon, and then there's another shot of the maze, and then it goes back to Batman. And the first thing he says is, "It's a maze." It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
We know it's a maze. There are like a couple moments of that, and I know it's a super tiny nitpick on my part, to be very honest with you. It's just it's one of the things that ruined it chapter 2 for me is that every single time something happened, uh they just said it as opposed to just letting us as the audience see it. And that movie did it far, far, far more times than the Batman did. But there were moments in this movie where I was like, yeah, we get it. It's a maze. We can.
Yeah, I don't remember that with It Chapter 2, but I'll have to rewatch it. But
I distinctly remember. I haven't actually seen the movie since it came out, but I do remember that being like my big issue with it. But aside from the point, the one thing that I think we're trying to allude to,
it's funny how it transitions from a clown to a clown, right? Because Matt, this is something that I was referencing at the beginning of this episode that you said about building universes. Sometimes you just don't need to do it. Yeah. And the inclusion of the Joker in this, it just felt so forced and so unnecessary. And honestly, it just sucked. I'll let you guys talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I didn't like I mean, I don't think it was good. I will say that. But I think with me and my whole like view of it, like it didn't make or break the movie for me, but I do agree that like I do think it was forced. And I think, and this has always been my thing with DC is I've always felt like they tried really quickly to try and catch up to what Marvel did, and I think that's why, getting back to the future, like the past films, I didn't like them because I just felt it was like very rushed. And I'm excited, if this is going to be the portrayal of this DC universe, if this is like what Iron Man was to Marvel, this movie, I'm very excited for it. But I do agree with you that like my initial reactions of the Joker again, I think this is going to be like this with every Joker from here on out because like I just said, the cream of the crop villain actor is Joker, and it was Heath Ledger. You know what I mean? I think with every Joker we get from here on out, it's not a comparison to the Jokers before. It's comparison to it's not comparison to Jared Leto. It's comparison to Heath Ledger. I mean, that's what you expect. And I think it's going to be hard regardless of who it is. But I do agree with Connor that like at first I didn't even know it was. I walking out, I was like, I thought it was Two-Face.
Yeah, and it does look like
I didn't even know that was Joker.
So the portrayal they're going for is obviously the more comic book aligned, like face burned by acid Joker, which is fine. I have two fundamental problems with that scene. One, first of all, I don't agree with the choice to do it, but if you're going to do it, why is it in the movie and why is it not a post-credit scene? Yeah. That was such a like middle of the credits kind of 2-second thing that didn't apply to the rest of the movie. I don't know why it was in the actual version of the film. Secondly, I don't like the way, and maybe it's just because of my fanboy nature, but like every single time we've had a Joker, the 4 live action, with the exception of Cesar Romero from the 60s TV show, the 4 live action film versions of the Joker that we've all had have been events. Jack Nicholson as the Joker, Heath Ledger, all of the press leading up to this Oscar-winning performance that just so happened to have coincided with his passing. We throw Jared Leto to the side. Just move that away.
That's not Jared Leto's fault, by the way.
It's not Jared Leto's fault. No. And then you have Joaquin Phoenix in this standalone new take on the character. Like, to me, like this just felt like putting the Joker in for having the Joker's sake and like not really caring about like what that means for the story,
And honestly, because obviously this is the type of guy I am, and the viewers and listeners of this will figure this out. Like I'm a very like, as soon as I watch this movie, of course I go back and watch all the Nolan ones, and they at the end of Batman Begins, they did this same thing where it wasn't a post-credit scene, but they introduced the Joker at the very end. And I think that the way that they did that, they didn't actually like put the Joker in, they just put the card in. You know what I mean? Yeah. Very cliche and whatnot, but it was like it worked. And I just don't think that like this this worked. But I think it's hard to say because like this is getting back to what I said earlier, like the very first thing I said when comparing it. I'll have a final judgment of that scene when we see what happens next. You know what I mean? Like what they do going forward with it, because from my takeaway from that scene was the Riddler and the Joker. That's the next whatever. That's gonna be, they're gonna break out, something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they can make it work like that, but again, it was post credit scene, but it wasn't a post credit scene. You know,
Right.
So
So
it didn't belong in the movie.
And it just didn't, like, to go along with the Dark Knight. They did it great, and at that point, you hadn't seen a live action Joker for a while.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. But like honestly, I would have been very happy if this just didn't even. Why do we need the Joker right now? Like
Exactly.
it's a
thought
money
it didn't
maker.
fit the ending. It didn't fit the ending of the film at all.
No, it
No.
didn't. It didn't. It's a money maker, so it makes
Yeah.
sense why they do it. But I mean, I would have been way more interested in seeing like a new adaptation of Mr. Freeze and the Court of Owls in the second movie, with the Riddler still kind of pulling strings in some way and keeping it all aligned.
You know what I was really hoping for? This is the other fundamental problem I had with this scene is like, why the Joker right now?
That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like, I love the way that there was a little bit post credits. I know we talked about how we didn't necessarily know if there was a post credit scene, but right after the credits end, the Riddler's question mark pops back up on the screen and it says goodbye. Like when he was doing like the texting communication with the Riddler earlier in the movie or whatever. And I thought that that's a really cool thing to put at the end. It's almost like this isn't over kind of deal. Like somehow Riddler has access to this again. And like, I don't think we needed the Joker for that.
No.
What I wish, and the thing is you mentioned is like, we just had Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker 2 years ago.
Yeah. It's very so still all very new.
And we already know that is entirely standalone, right? There's no relation to anything else.
Hopefully. Let's see what happens.
Yeah,
Money talks.
Just leave it alone. Just let it be there. So if you're going to add another villain to it, why not do something that I think would relate to the world more? Why not do like Scarecrow?
Yeah.
You want to turn Batman into a horror movie.
I think the Mr. Freeze thing, I think it could have, coming off of Riddler, like if you're going to go next villain here, I would have chosen the likes of like Mr. Freeze or something like that, because Mr. Freeze, at least from what I can remember, is also crazy. You know what I mean? In the sense of like how he perceives things, and like, I mean, he freezes people. So it's like, that's a perfect like way, and it's also just a perfect way into like meshing the realism of this film into like the DC universe. You know what I mean? He's a perfect like bridge character, because I mean, like in real life, there's no freeze guns. You know what I mean? It's not a thing. That's something where like you can start to like mix into like the not so realistic part of this universe in characters like Superman, like that. He's a very type like good bridge character in my opinion. When I think of Batman villains, you know what I mean? That's something that like he's that character that it's like, okay, he's one of them, along with like whatever, if you want to do the comic book version of Bane, you know what I mean, where it's like not the Nolan version where it's just a regular guy, you know what I mean? But it's like,
yeah,
it's like
where like it's just a strong guy who has a mask and speaks weird.
But I think like those type of characters are that's how you move this Batman into the DC universe away from like the realism part of it, which again, this brings me back to the whole Marvel thing, and I don't want it to be like a repeat of like what Marvel has done and the steps they've done, because I think that will hurt this franchise if they try. Like, it needs to be their own thing, and I think DC is a lot darker in my opinion than Marvel, and I think that like that's where like they need to like stick with, like they need to stick with that theme. And I just think the Joker right now is too early. I think of like the Joker as not even Heath Ledger's performance, but just the Joker is the best villain of all time. He's the villain, you know what I mean? And
one of them, yeah.
I think like second movie, it's too quick, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Based on how the universe is going, because they was in the second movie with the Dark Knight, that was perfect.
Right.
But
but it was
like,
only a trilogy, you know what I mean? It's just like
And that's another thing. Like this doesn't like okay, you can make a trilogy with the Batman, but this doesn't need to build into some larger universe. Just make a Batman movie.
Yeah.
That's all we need. That we
Yeah.
there's not everything needs to be Captain Marvel to Captain America, which leads into Iron Man, which leads into
Right.
this, and it's all connected. It's nice to have those Easter eggs and those cameos, but it's like that's just part of the reason where it's like I would have been fine with just one single Batman movie, just like we got one single Joker movie, because it was an Oscar-winning movie, and this should be an Oscar-winning movie as well. And it's just like, why force the Joker in there just to set up what's coming down the line when you don't need that based on the entire 3 hours of film we just watched?
Right.
People are going to go back to see it. It made $260 million worldwide in its opening weekend. People are going to go back to see the movie.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. It's one of those things where like, it's like I said, it's twofold. One, I don't agree with the idea of randomly setting up another villain at the end of the movie when it doesn't need it. The movie didn't warrant it. And then on top of that, if you're going to do that, I certainly don't agree with it being the Joker in this iteration of the universe right now.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Which is why I propose something like Scarecrow, because it's something that you can do like a legitimate, like if you wanted to take this movie and, you know, we talk about, oh, it's a neo-noir with some spooky elements. You want to make Batman a fucking horror movie? Have the Scarecrow be the next villain.
Yeah. And I think that the Scarecrow in the Nolan films was there in all three movies, but he wasn't like, it wasn't the main villain in any of them. You know what I mean?
I think they did fine things with the Scarecrow, but I would love to see like a super accurate, like basically biological terrorist kind of take on Scarecrow. And I think that would fit really well with this world that they've already built. But the Joker thing just made no sense. Like
I'm glad we're all in agreement with that, because I mean,
like I said, I was walking out of the theater and I was like, wait, was that Two-Face? I was like, I didn't even know that was saying that. Like,
I see people on Twitter and everything praising how good that was and everything, and I just think they're just fanboys and they're not looking at it.
Who was it?
I have no idea.
It's Barry something. It's the same guy who played Druig in Eternals.
Oh, okay.
The guy who could mind control people, and he was an Eternal. And I don't even love that casting, to be completely honest. Now I will if that's in a legit casting, I will give it its time and I will base it on the performance. I hate basing it on casting, but I mean the laugh sucked. Let's be honest, the laugh wasn't good. You got to base the Joker on the laugh.
I will say I did have a fanboy moment when I saw it originally on Thursday, because I know the person I texted about this is probably going to watch this. So if you're watching, Mark, just know that what I said I texted him afterwards and I said, I shit myself when I realized that it was the Joker. Legitimately. Like, it was one of those moments where I was like, in the moment, I was like, yeah, this is awesome. But, you know, the more that I think about it and talking it through here is like, I don't fucking get it.
I will give them props though. I do like the way I don't like the way it was done, but I like the idea behind it that they're both in Arkham.
Sure.
Like they're both that's that like I like that they established that connection. You know what I mean? I thought the idea of the scene was good, but the way it came out was not. You know, like I didn't like the way it came out, but I like the idea of it.
I think the idea of it adds a really cool wrinkle to the story that makes the world feel more lived in. Like, oh, you know, we jump into here 2 years in, right? We have this whole Riddler thing, but if Joker's here in Arkham with the Riddler, then that means that the Joker has already done some stuff in this world and Batman's already encountered him before. That's a really cool idea. I just didn't think that it needed to be here. Right, exactly. Like in concept, that's a really cool idea to make the world feel like stuff has already happened, right? It builds stakes a little bit if you're going to introduce the character moving forward, but it just didn't make sense in the context of this movie, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, like it doesn't kill the film. It's just like it seemed like it was like, why is this here? Like
Right.
that, you know what I mean? Like that's what it felt
It
like,
left a
so.
sour taste in my mouth leaving the theater. That was the biggest thing that left a sour taste in my mouth. So it didn't ruin the film, but it did like put a damper in my thoughts. But that's just me. But
For sure. All
I
right.
think it's time to rate this bitch.
Yeah. So it's time to get into the scores. Matt, we'll start with you. We'll do scores out of 10. What are you feeling on a score for the Batman?
Again, I'm gonna go back to like the first thing I said, and I think if this is they're going in, they're trying to make a universe out of this thing, and they're trying to go for the whole intertwining and connecting here of movies and stuff. I thought it was great. You know, I mean, we talked about the post credit scene and their lead into the next movie. Maybe again, like it's the first one, so like we don't know what's coming next. And that because of that, in I rate this thing in terms of what I would like how I reacted to the first Iron Man movie. And again, I said I'm a huge Marvel guy and I love that, but it's like that was the kicking off of their whole thing. I really like this movie. It was a different take. It was a step forward from where DC has come, a huge step forward from what they've done in the past. And it was a step like to the forward and like to the right of like where Nolan's films were. And I love Nolan's films and I love like the realistic part of it. I think I'm gonna go I'm gonna go 9. I'm gonna go 9. It was a solid 9 in my book. Like I didn't there's nothing that I was like I really didn't like that. And there was a lot of like I really did like that. I really did what they like how they came across this movie. I like Pattinson. I thought his portrayal of Batman was something we've never seen, and the detective thing that gets back to the comics to me, and that's what really sold it for me is he was a detective in this movie, and that's what I really loved about it. So I'm gonna go 9.
Connor, what about you?
If you asked me right out the theater, I probably would have said like 7.8 or something like that. But look, thinking back on it now, I mean the movie itself was so good. Everything about the movie, there was no bad performance. There was some questionable dialogue that I'm glad you brought up, Zach, because I thought the same thing. But everything was so well done. There were a few things that kind of hampered it for me for what I like. I did not like the Joker at the end, but if you take the film for what it is, which is what you have to do when you critique a film, you can't base it on what you want it to be or what you think it should be, is a detective Batman film. And when you go by that, it's the best Batman that we've seen in live action. It's not my favorite Batman that I've seen in live action, but it's the best representation of exactly what you get from the comics. I'd probably go like probably an 8.9 if I had to give a score. There's some things that I wish were done better, a little bit better. That's me nitpicking, but I mean, if we're saying for me, like 9 and above would be like when we do scores later in our podcast, 9 and above would probably be like a like top movie of all time. I think Batman is going to be, the more it goes by, I think it's going to sit right on the cusp of like, this is going to be considered a juggernaut in the film industry. And who knows, that might change, but yeah, 8.9.
Yeah. So generally speaking, I tend to, if those of you watching this have seen any of the reviews I've written before, specifically those on my Letterboxd profile, you know that I kind of conflate the out of 10 scale basically with a letter grade with a couple of different twists on it. So if I had to give this movie a letter grade, it would be an A-, conflate that to about a 9. The average score through the three of us is would come out to a 9. So we'll call the official Popcorn Pillow Talk score of the Batman a 9.0 out of 10. And that does it for this episode.
Yeah. This is going to be our first review, so that's cool. This will be our first official review, so I hope you all liked it because I had a blast talking Batman with you guys. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I mean, I could talk superhero movies literally all day. Connor knows this. I could go on for like days and not eat just talking superheroes.
Yeah. So if you guys have any suggestions, make sure to leave those below, whether it be in a review or in a comment. Leave some nice words if you like the episode. Make sure to follow us on all of our socials as well. Like I said, we got some good ideas coming down the pike, not just for reviews, but for other segments and other content that we want to do. So make sure to stick out, subscribe to the show, all that jazz. For Matt and Connor, I'm your host, Zach. This has been the review of the Batman on Popcorn Pillow Talk, and we will see you next time.